The first thing Grace Miller noticed about Dante Moretti's missing shirt was that everyone else had already decided she was guilty. The second thing she noticed was that the shirt had never actually left the hotel. At 11:47 p.m., beneath the blinding white lights of the Belmont Crown laundry floor, two Moretti security men stood beside overturned linen carts while the hotel's executive director, Charles Harlan, demanded that Grace open every employee locker. Outside the narrow basement windows, rain hammered downtown Chicago hard enough to blur the lights of Michigan Avenue. Inside, $40,000 worth of tailored black clothing lay across stainless steel tables, and Dante Moretti stood in the middle of it all without raising his voice. That was what made him frightening. He was tall, immaculately dressed despite the hour, his charcoal suit falling perfectly over a body built less like a businessman than a man accustomed to ending arguments personally. No visible weapon, no visible langueur, only stillness. His eyes settled on Grace. Your department received the shirt at 6:14. Grace kept her hands loosely folded in front of her gray uniform. Yes. It was logged. Yes. And now it's gone. Yes. Harlan stepped forward eagerly. Mr. Moretti, Miss Miller supervises every employee on this floor. Obviously, if there's been theft, there hasn't. The room went silent. Harlan turned toward her. Grace looked at Dante instead. One of his guards actually shifted. Dante didn't. You're certain. I'm certain your shirt wasn't stolen. You have 5 seconds to explain the distinction. Grace held his gaze. Stop searching my employees. Harlan nearly choked. Dante's expression changed by less than a fraction. That wasn't an explanation. No. It was a condition. Every instinct Grace possessed told her she should be afraid. She was. But behind her stood 18 laundry workers, most of whom would lose their jobs before breakfast if the Belmont needed someone convenient to blame. So Grace walked past Dante, crossed to a rolling rack, and removed a black custom shirt sealed beneath transparent garment film. Harlan stared. That's impossible. Grace laid it on the steel table. Dante looked at it once. That is not my shirt. It is. My tailor hand stitches my identifying label. I know. Grace opened the collar, which is why I noticed someone removed it. Now Dante moved. Only one step. But everyone else seemed to retreat, without realizing they had done it. Grace turned the collar toward the light. A black label carrying the Moretti monogram had been sewn into place, perfect to most eyes. Not to hers. The thread is wrong, she said. Your original labels use 6 stitches per centimeter with a doubled left anchor. This one uses 5. Harlan laughed nervously. You expect us to believe. Grace slid a seam ripper beneath the label. Dante's hand closed around her wrist. The contact lasted perhaps 1 second. It felt much longer. His grip wasn't painful. It was absolute. What are you doing? Showing you why someone wanted your shirt. He watched her, then released her. Grace cut 3 stitches. The false label peeled backward. Something thin had been sewn beneath it. A strip of cream-colored fabric no wider than her smallest finger. Tiny red and black thread marks crossed it in deliberate intervals. Dante stopped breathing. Not visibly. Grace only knew because she was standing close enough to see the sudden stillness in his chest. His eyes went cold, far colder than before. Everyone out. Harlan blinked. Mr. Moretti. Now. Within 30 seconds, only Grace, Dante, and his security chief remained. Dante stared at the coated strip. Where did you find this? Inside your collar. I mean, who put it there? If I knew, you wouldn't be searching my department. His security chief, Matteo Russo, gave Grace a look suggesting few people spoke to Dante that way twice. Dante barely seemed to hear her. He touched one black stitch. Old courier notation. Grace watched him. You recognize it? He lifted his eyes. Yes. What does it say? That depends on whether someone expects me to find it. A beat passed. Then Dante folded the fabric strip into his palm. From this moment, you don't leave this hotel alone. Grace stared at him. That sounded less like a request than I'd prefer. It wasn't a request. Then my answer is no. His eyes sharpened. Grace gestured toward the room. You wanted to know what happened to the shirt. I helped. That does not make me your employee. No. Dante stepped closer. It makes you the only person in this building who noticed a dead smuggling language hidden under my name. For the first time, something beneath his control showed itself. Not anger, fear, not for himself, for what she had just become part of. Which makes you valuable, he said quietly. Grace's throat tightened. To you? His casa held hers. To whoever realizes you noticed. By 2 a.m, the Belmont's laundry department had become the center of a war nobody upstairs knew had begun. The hotel was hosting the North American Meridian Summit, 3 days of private negotiations among financiers, shipping executives, senators, international investors, and men whose official biographies omitted far more than they included. Grace knew none of their politics. She knew their clothing. Room 2208 had sent down a tuxedo jacket with champagne on the cuff. Suite 3101 preferred cedar hangers. The French delegation's shirts came through express, pressing every morning at 5. And Luca Vescari, the charming financier everyone in the hotel seemed desperate to impress, had sent down 9 garments in 24 hours despite apparently changing clothes only twice. Dante stood beside Grace's workstation while she pulled digital logs. You remember all of this? I remember patterns. You remember 3,000 pieces of clothing. I remember things that go wrong. She clicked another record. Your shirt wasn't the only irregular one. Dante leaned closer. Grace became irritatingly aware of the warmth of his body beside hers. A white dinner jacket belonging to a Canadian shipping magnate had been processed under the wrong suite number. A senator's coat had been returned 37 minutes late. An investment banker's blazer had bypassed the laundry entirely, but still appeared in the garment tracking system. Grace arranged the records chronologically. Dante watched the screen. Not laundry. What? They're using the department as a switchboard, Grace said. Clothing comes down from one room, gets relabeled, then is delivered to another floor before being corrected later. Nobody notices because luxury hotels move garments constantly. Dante looked at her. Grace pointed toward the service elevator map. Someone built a communication route where the messages physically walk into secure rooms. Matteo swore under his breath. Dante didn't. He simply looked at Grace with an expression she couldn't identify. What? You should be frightened. I am. You don't look frightened. She met his eyes. My employees are still downstairs. Fear doesn't get them home safely. Something moved behind his face. Fascination, perhaps. Then denial closed over it. Dante straightened. Matteo, lock down every service route without making it look locked down. Grace shook her head. No. Both men turned. If you change the routes, whoever is doing this will know we found them. Dante's mouth tightened. You have a better idea? Keep everything normal. And leave my people exposed. My people too. That is exactly why I won't. Grace folded her arms. You don't get to protect me by turning 18 working people into bait. His stare hardened. And you don't get to tell me how to keep you alive. I'm not asking you to keep me alive. His voice dropped. That is becoming obvious. The silence between them suddenly felt too private, too charged. Matteo looked away. Grace did too. They worked until dawn, not in Dante's penthouse. Grace refused. So one of the most feared men in Chicago sat in a folding chair in the Belmont laundry office, drinking terrible vending machine coffee, while Grace reconstructed 3 days of garment movements. At 4:17, she laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because Dante took one sip of the coffee and looked personally betrayed. You've survived assassination attempts, but instant coffee defeats you? I have standards. You accused me of stealing a shirt 4 hours ago. I was wrong. Grace glanced at him. The apology had been so simple she almost missed it. Do you often admit that? No. Should I frame the moment? His mouth almost changed. Almost. Then an elevator bell sounded outside. Matteo entered carrying a clear evidence bag. Inside was another strip of coded fabric, found beneath the cuff of Senator Carrick's coat. Dante decoded the first sequence using a small handwritten card he removed from his wallet. Grace noticed immediately. You carry the cipher. He said nothing. You said this system was old. It is. How old? 12 years. And you carry the key every day? His silence answered. Grace stared at him. This wasn't merely something Dante recognized. It belonged to him. Or had. What happened 12 years ago? He looked toward the rain-silvered window. My father used the system. Grace waited. Dante's jaw flexed. He believed electronics created evidence. Fabric didn't. Tailors, laundries, coat checks, hotel staff, people powerful men never saw. And you shut it down? I burned every route I could find. Why? His eyes returned to hers. Because he started selling information about families under our protection. There it was, the hidden fracture beneath Dante Moretti's polished violence. He hadn't inherited an empire cleanly. He had cut one out of his father's hands. Grace lowered her voice. You kept the cipher because you thought it might come back. No. Then why? His eyes moved over her face. Some things you destroy. A pause. Some things remind you why you did. Before Grace could answer, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the laundry office. Dante was on his feet instantly. His hand found Grace's waist and pulled her behind him. A silent shot cracked through the glass. The window behind Grace exploded. Dante drove her to the floor. Matteo fired toward the service corridor. Another shot struck the metal desk. Grace felt Dante's body covering hers. One arm braced over her head. Then men were shouting, running. Glass fell like ice. Seconds later, silence. Dante lifted his face. You hit? No. His hands moved over her shoulders anyway. I said I'm not hit. I heard you. Then why are you? Because I need to know. The words came out rougher than anything she had heard from him. His hand reached her cheek. Stopped. He stared at his own fingers as if he had nearly revealed something dangerous. Then lowered them. Matteo entered. Shooter escaped through the east dock. Dante stood. His expression had become terrifyingly calm. Fin him. Grace rose slowly. Don't she? He looked at her. Don't kill someone because a window broke. The window didn't offend me. His gaze dropped to the glass beside her feet. He tried to put a bullet through your head. Grace expected Dante to move her to a fortress. Instead, after an argument neither of them technically won, he relocated the entire night laundry staff to a secure conference floor and paid each employee triple wages to continue working while his people guarded every exit. Grace discovered this at breakfast. You moved all of them? You said you wouldn't abandon them. So you protected 18 people to keep me cooperative? Dante looked over his coffee. If that explanation makes you more comfortable. It didn't. That was the problem. By the second night, they had identified 7 coded garments and 4 message routes. Every route intersected with Luca Vescari. But Grace found something worse. A garment assigned to Vescari had been logged using her supervisor credentials at 1:13 a.m. At that exact time, she had been sitting beside Dante. Someone had cloned her access. Dante stared at the screen. They're preparing to blame you. For the whole network. Yes. Grace sat back. For the first time since this began, real panic broke through her composure. If police found a smuggling route running through her department under her login, her employees would be questioned. Her career would disappear. Her name would become a headline. Dante crouched in front of her. The gesture startled her more than his anger ever had. He was a man people stood for, yet he lowered himself until their eyes were level. Grace. She looked at him. No one is putting this on you. You can't promise that. I just did. That doesn't make it true. His voice softened dangerously. You still don't understand what a promise from me means. That may be because normal people don't build promises out of threats. A shadow crossed his face. Then he said, I'll learn another language. Grace couldn't speak. Neither could he apparently, because Dante stood abruptly and walked to the window. That evening, Grace found him alone on the rooftop terrace in the rain. Chicago burned gold and white beneath the clouds. You're avoiding me, she said. I'm giving you distance. That isn't the same thing. For me it is. Grace stepped under the awning. You protected my employees. Yes. You arranged attorneys for them. Yes. You had my mother's apartment watched. His face hardened. You weren't supposed to know that. I know everything that moves through hotel service entrances. He looked almost annoyed at himself. Grace studied him. You're becoming very bad at pretending this is only about the cipher. Rain ran from his dark hair. Dante turned toward the skyline. That would be easier. For whom? For you. Grace took one step closer. And for you. He looked at her then. The distance between them shrank without either moving. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. His hand lifted, almost touched the damp strand of hair against her cheek. Stopped. Dante curled his fingers into his palm. You should go downstairs. Why? Because I'm trying very hard not to make decisions for both of us. Grace's heartbeat changed. And if you stop trying? His expression became almost painful. You would hate me. She whispered. You sound afraid of that. I am. Before anything else could happen, Matteo pushed through the rooftop door. We found the source. The moment shattered. Viscari suite? Dante asked. Matteo shook his head. Yours. Hidden behind a decorative vent inside Dante's summit suite was a camera, not aimed at his desk. At his closet, someone had been watching which garments he wore, when they left, and when they returned. But the greater betrayal came from the access log. Only 5 people had entered that suite. Grace, Matteo, 2 guards, and Dante's longtime legal advisor, Adrian Moretti, his uncle, the man who had helped Dante dismantle his father's courier network 12 years earlier. Dante stared at Adrian's access record for a long time. Grace stood beside him. Could it be cloned? Not his biometric entry. What will you do? Dante's voice went cold. Ask him. Adrian was already gone. So was Luca Viscari. The summit ballroom erupted 20 minutes later, when federal agents arrived carrying warrants naming Grace Miller as the suspected coordinator of an illegal information transfer operation. Cameras appeared almost instantly. Someone had tipped off the press. Grace stood beneath the enormous crystal chandeliers while guests whispered and reporters shouted her name. An agent stepped toward her. Miss Miller, we need you to come with us. Dante moved between them. The ballroom fell silent. The agent stiffened. Mr. Moretti, don't obstruct a federal investigation. I'm not. Dante handed him a drive. You're investigating the wrong person. The drive contained every garment log Grace had reconstructed, surveillance footage from the laundry department, copied hotel access records, and photographs of the hidden camera. Dante had duplicated everything. The agent examined him. Why are you giving us this? Dante looked over his shoulder at Grace. Because the woman you're about to put in handcuffs is the reason you have a case. Across the ballroom, Grace saw a hotel employee lift a phone. A tiny red light blinked. A laser. Grace understood 1 second before Dante did. Then she shoved him. The first gunshot shattered a chandelier. Chaos exploded. Guests screamed. Security dragged people behind tables. Dante caught Grace around the waist as another shot tore through the wall behind them. Black-suited men flooded the ballroom. Grace found herself on the marble floor beneath Dante again, his body shielding hers. His face was inches from hers. Why did you push me? You were going to get shot. His eyes burned. That was not permission to take my place. This may shock you, but bullets don't wait for permission. Another shot cracked. Dante almost smiled. It was the most terrifying expression Grace had seen from him. Then he stood and became exactly what everyone had always said he was. Controlled violence. Orders given once. Men moving instantly. The shooter was trapped near the kitchens. But Viscari was not the man holding the rifle. Adrian Moretti was. And when Dante saw his uncle across the service corridor, something inside him died. Adrian raised the weapon. Dante raised his own. Grace caught Dante's wrist. No. Adrian laughed bitterly. There she is. Your weakness. Dante didn't look away from him. No. His voice was quiet. She's the first thing in years that made weakness worth having. Adrian's expression twisted. He fired. Dante pulled Grace sideways and returned 1 shot. Adrian fell. Alive. Wounded. Disarmed. Dante stood over him. I should kill you. Adrian coughed. You became exactly like your father. Dante's face went still. Grace stepped closer. No. Both men looked at her. She looked only at Dante. You didn't. Dante lowered the weapon. Sirens filled the hotel. Adrian laughed again. You think Viscari needed me after tonight? The final exchange is already moving. Grace froze her. Through what? Adrian smiled. The summit departure luggage. Grace turned toward Dante. No. What? Not luggage. She ran. The Belmont loading dock was chaos. Suitcases. Garment bags. Town cars. Security teams evacuating diplomats and executives. Grace moved through it all, searching for the one pattern she had seen without understanding. 9 garments from Vescari. Constant change. Wrong room numbers. The code wasn't merely carrying information into the summit. It was collecting information out. She grabbed a departing garment bag from a valet. The label read Suite 1804, but the stitching pattern belonged to 2902. Grace ripped the label open. A fabric strip fell out. Names, dates, amounts, targets. Enough coded intelligence to expose protected judges, undercover witnesses, shipping routes, and private negotiations. Enough to start a war. A black SUV screeched onto the dock. Luca Vescari stepped out with 2 armed men. Miss Miller. Grace backed toward the wall. Vescari smiled. You've made an astonishing amount of trouble for someone who washes shirts. I don't wash them. His smile disappeared. I supervise. One of his men grabbed her. Vescari took the garment bag. You noticed what men worth billions did not. Grace struggled. That seems to bother you. No. I admire it. He lifted a pistol. Unfortunately, admiration has very little practical value. Headlights flooded the dock. 3 black SUVs blocked the exit. Dante stepped from the center vehicle. No umbrella. No hesitation. Rain struck his shoulders as his men spread around him. Vescari pressed the gun to Grace's side. Dante stopped. Something changed in his face when he saw the weapon touching her. Not rage. Something worse. Fear. Let her go. Vescari laughed. You destroyed this network once. Your father understood what information was worth. You never did. I understand exactly what it's worth. Dante's eyes never left Grace. Nothing. Vescari lifted the coded garment bag. This is worth governments. No. Dante's voice was steady. She is standing in front of you. Grace's breath caught. Vescari saw it and smiled. There it is. He leaned toward Grace. The great Dante Moretti finally has a price. Dante said nothing. That silence confirmed everything. Vescari demanded the original cipher key. Dante removed the worn card from his wallet. 12 years of memory. His father's handwriting. The last surviving key to an empire of secrets. He held it over a barrel fire burning near the dock. Vescari's expression changed. You wouldn't. Dante looked at Grace, then dropped the card into the flames. The cipher curled black. Gone. You're insane. Dante's gaze hardened. No. He took 1 step forward. I finally know what matters more than winning. The dock lights died. Matteo had cut them. Grace drove her heel down on her captor's foot and twisted away. Gunfire erupted. Dante reached her before she hit the ground. He pulled her behind a concrete barrier as his men closed on Vescari's position. 30 seconds later, it was over. Vescari lay disarmed beneath the rain, surrounded by police arriving through the service tunnel. Dante barely looked at him. He was on his knees in front of Grace. His hands touched her face, shoulders, arms. Are you hurt? No. Grace. I'm not hurt. His forehead nearly touched hers. You keep saying that like I'm capable of believing you. Her hands closed around his wrists. Don't you? He finally stopped moving. Rain ran down both their faces. You burned the cipher. Yes. You kept it 12 years. Yes. For me? He stared at her. There is no version of tonight in which I choose that piece of paper over you. The world seemed to disappear behind the rain. Grace whispered. That sounds dangerously close to a confession. No. His hand slid behind her neck. He stopped before pulling her closer. Even now, even here, waiting. What is it then? She asked. Dante's voice dropped. A warning. Grace smiled shakily. About what? That I don't know how to want something halfway. She stepped into the space he had refused to take. Then don't. And kissed him. 3 months later, the Belmont Crown reopened its redesigned laundry department under new management. Charles Harlan had been fired. Adrian Moretti was awaiting trial. Luca Vescari's coded network had collapsed after federal investigators, using Grace's reconstruction, identified courier routes across 6 hotels and 3 countries. Grace refused every interview request. She also refused Dante's offer to buy the Belmont. You can't purchase every place where something bad happens to me. I can. You shouldn't. I'll consider your opinion. You'll obey my opinion. Dante looked offended by the word. Grace kissed his cheek. He reconsidered. Instead, Dante funded an independent employee protection program requiring luxury hotels to provide legal representation before blaming hourly staff for guest property claims. He never put his name on it. Grace knew anyway. Late one winter evening, she finished her shift and found Dante sitting in the same folding chair inside her office where he had spent their first night. A perfect black suit. A paper cup of terrible vending machine coffee. Grace leaned against the doorway. "You hate that coffee?" "I do." "Then why are you drinking it?" He looked around the tiny room. "Sentimental reasons. Dante Moretti is sentimental. Repeat that publicly and I'll deny it." She laughed. His eyes softened. Only for her. He stood and placed a white garment box on her desk. Grace narrowed her eyes. "If that contains jewelry, I'm leaving." "It doesn't." She opened it. Inside lay the black shirt that had started everything. Restored. The false label removed. The original Moretti label resewn into the collar. Grace ran her thumb over the stitching. 6 stitches per centimeter. Doubled left anchor. Perfect. "You found the original label?" Matteo recovered it from Viscari's evidence. Grace looked up. Dante was watching her with that same impossible stillness from the first night. But she knew what lived beneath it now. Devotion. Fear. Obsession disciplined into patience. Love expressed first through locked doors, protected employees, burnt ciphers, and a man learning that protection did not mean possession. Grace placed the shirt back in the box. "You accused me of stealing this." "I remember." "You threatened to search my staff." "I remember that too." "You were unbearable." "I remain unbearable." "True." He stepped closer. His fingers brushed hers. This time, he didn't stop. "And yet," Dante murmured. Grace looked into the eyes of the man half the city feared. And yet, outside, snow drifted over Chicago. Below them, washing machines turned steadily behind walls of glass. Ordinary work, ordinary lives. The kind of world Dante had once believed men like him could only stand outside of. Grace reached for his coat. "Come on." "Where?" "Dinner." "I made reservations." "I know. I cancelled them." His brow lowered. "Why?" "Because you've spent 3 months trying to impress me with restaurants where the water has a wine list." "It does not have a wine list." One place had a water sommelier. He was excellent. Grace laughed and pulled him toward the door. "There's a diner 2 blocks away. In this weather, you survived assassins." "I dislike cold." "You dislike coffee too, apparently. But look how brave you've become." Dante let her drag him into the corridor. Before the elevator doors closed, he caught her hand and pulled her gently back toward him. Not controlling, not demanding, simply unwilling to let another ordinary second pass without touching her. Grace looked up. "What?" His thumb moved across her knuckles. "I spent most of my life believing every person eventually became leverage." Her expression softened. "And now?" Dante glanced toward the laundry room, toward the shirt in the box, toward the place where one tiny line of wrong stitching had changed everything. Then he looked at her. "Now I know some people become home." The elevator doors opened. Grace squeezed his hand. "Good." She stepped inside. "Because you're still paying for dinner." Dante followed her. For the first time in years, the most feared man in Chicago walked willingly into an uncertain future. And for once, he carried no cipher telling him where to go.